It is done. Sansa has completed everything she needed to do in King's Landing. However, despite her warnings to Tyrion, the schemes continue. The game continues. Now, Sansa's next destination is the Twins, where the Boltons and Freys could very well betray her family. Will she reach her family in time? Welcome to DH Stories 80, where stories come to life. From iconic fandoms to eerie legends, there's always a new world to explore. Now, let's begin Chapter 7 of The Bloody Stark. Let's dive in. Varys POV. Varys was so shocked that he had no idea how much time had passed since Sansa had killed Maester Pycelle, Lord Tywin, and Baelish before leaving the small council chambers. He didn't even remember when he had sat down on a chair, with Tywin's pale, lifeless body on his left and Baelish's corpse sprawled across the floor in front of him. His heart was still racing, despite all his efforts to calm himself after he had just witnessed the sight of Sansa holding up ice with one hand, the girl, only 14 at the time, leaping across the length of the small council table, grabbing Tywin by the throat and killing him. Varys wiped the sweat from his brow, staring at the clear liquid on his fingers as the sound of snapping necks echoed once more in his mind. He knew it took great strength to break a neck with both hands, but to do it with one? And by a girl so young? Varys didn't know what to think. Her voice played in his mind, her words demanding the truth from the Maester, from Baelish, and from himself. Secret thoughts had been dragged into the open by Sansa's will alone, and it was terrifying. Varys was only glad the Mad King was dead. The madman would have executed him if he had ever discovered that the bald Master of Whispers was secretly a Blackfire. Of course, none of that mattered now. A part of him was even relieved that the second Mad King reborn, Joffrey, was also dead. He would still keep his true identity hidden, of course, but he knew Sansa could expose him at any time if he failed to follow her instructions. Taking a deep breath, Varys shook his head and stood up. It was time to fulfill his part of the bargain. He needed to send the ravens, announcing the end of the war, and to warn Robb Stark. Just as he began to push his chair back, he heard voices, Tyrion Lannister among them, and footsteps rushing toward the entrance of the small council chambers. As Varys pushed the chair aside and turned, he met Tyrion's shocked expression. The dwarf was staring past him, at the body of his father. "What?" Tyrion whispered, his voice hollow, as Sir Loras followed him into the chamber. The knight froze, stunned by the bodies before him. Tyrion turned his gaze to Varys. Did Sansa... Yes, Varys answered before Tyrion could finish the question. Then he asked what had been tormenting him. How is she still alive? And how is she able to do what she has done? Tyrion stepped past him, staring down at Tywin's body. "I can't say," he replied. "We didn't even have the nerve to ask." He turned to look back at Varys and asked quietly, "Why didn't she kill you?" "Apparently I did not hurt her, emotionally or physically," Varys replied. "I suspect that's also the reason you're still alive." His tone made it a statement, not a question. Tyrion nodded slowly. Varys then relayed Sansa's message. The ravens must be sent to all the wardens. The war was to be declared over, and a warning must be delivered to Riverrun regarding a possible trap by the Freys and the betrayal of Roose Bolton. Tyrion said nothing, only stared first at his father's body and then at Pycelle's, and finally back to Varys. "You have my condolences regarding King Joffrey and your sister," Varys added softly. Tyrion nodded. "I despised them, and my father, but they were still family, still Lannisters." Then he turned his eyes back to Tywin's body and said, after Sansa left us outside the royal chambers, and after calming Tommen, I spoke with Lady Olenna. Ah, Varys murmured. He had suspected some scheming, despite Tyrion's promise to Sansa that no Lannister blood would sit the throne. We've decided that Tommen will still be king, and Marjorie his queen. Now that was a surprise, Varys thought, narrowing his eyes at the dwarf. Did you not promise Lady Sansa that no Lannister blood would sit on the throne? Yes, Tyrion answered as the Tyrell guards began removing the bodies. So many Lannisters and our vassals have died at her hands. He shook his head. But we will not give in to threats. No. Varys sighed. I promised to inform the realm of the Lannister losses and to warn her brother of Roose Bolton's betrayal. If I don't, she might come after me. He tried to will his heart to calm again, remembering the brutal ease with which Sansa had killed Tywin, Baelish, and Pycelle. She will not, Tyrion said with confidence. I was going to recommend to my father that he summon the mountain. Ah, the mountain. Varys understood what Tyrion meant. Gregor Clegane was not only full of hate and rage, he was also the strongest man under the Lannisters' banner. If anyone could stop Sansa, it was him. But if there was even a small, very small chance that she survived a fight with the mountain, they would all be in grave danger. Varys voiced his concern. The mountain is our last and best hope to ensure our safety, Tyrion insisted, and I do not believe Sansa, no matter how strong she is, will be able to get past the gates of the rock. I believe the mountain will stop her before that. Varys noticed Tyrion tensing slightly as he continued. Send a message to the realm, Lord Varys. Inform the wardens that they are to attend the wedding of King Tommen Baratheon and Queen Marjorie Tyrell. Varys saw Tyrion's face twist slightly in anger. Of course he's angry, Varys thought. Despite how the Lannisters treated him, they were still his family. But opposing Lady Sansa, knowing what she could do, Varys still wasn't sure of the full extent of her power. Perhaps it's time I left this country and find the Targaryen girl, he thought. Tyrion went on. Do not warn Robb Stark about any traitors. The mountain has retaken Harrenhal. Let Robb and his men travel from there to the Twins. Last I heard, they plan to attend Edmure Tully's wedding before returning to the north. And what would you have the mountain do, my lord? Sansa targeted my family. She targeted those who hurt her, those who were cruel. Varys interrupted. And I'm sorry to say, your nephew, the former king, and Queen Cersei were both exceptionally cruel. Lord Tywin forced her to marry you. Baelish caused Joffrey to change his mind, which led to Lord Eddard's death, and Pycelle was more than a Lannister lackey. Varys could see Tyrion pressing his lips together. What I'm saying, my lord, is that there is no need to expand the number of dead. Send the ravens, Lord Varys, Tyrion said coldly. To the wardens, to the twins, and to the mountain. I want Robb Stark and his mother dead. My father said Robb married a foreigner, and she's with child. I want them killed as well. Any Northmen who interfere must be eliminated. And when the mountain finds Sansa, he is to end her. Send a raven to Casterly Rock, too. Tell my uncle Kevin what's happened. Tell him I'm head of House Lannister now. Have him send knights and guards to replace those who have fallen in the Red Keep. Now go. Varys knew there was no changing Tyrion's mind. All he could do was bow slightly before the dwarf turned and walked out, flanked by the Tyrell guards. Varys would send the ravens. He would include the warnings Sansa had requested. A part of him agreed with Tyrion. Sansa was a threat, and if she could kill many Freys before falling to the mountain, Varys would not complain. But I will go to Pentos as soon as I can, he thought while stepping toward the doorway. From there, I'll use my birds to find Daenerys. If Lady Sansa survives the mountain, she could return someday, and I want to be far away when that happens. Sansa POV. After using water and a towel to wipe the dirt and blood off her body, it was relatively easy to take a simple dress from one of the empty servant quarters. The dress was a beige colored outfit with a skirt that reached her ankles, along with a pair of simple slippers left behind by the servants who had run away. Then, carrying ice in her hand, Sansa went off to the stables to get a horse. Throughout this time, she believed her threats of violence were enough to make Tyrion and Lady Olenna listen to and accept her warnings. It has to be enough, Sansa thought to herself. As she headed towards the stables, she passed by countless bodies, blood spattered on the floors and walls, all Lannister soldiers who had tried to stop her. Sansa didn't know if the city watch outside the keep had been notified of the massacre within. She thought, I'll have to leave before they're told what happened here. As she hurried through the hallways, Sansa thought back to what Vlad had told her, that she could take the form of any animal she chose. It was something to consider, and her mind went directly to the form of her dead direwolf lady. She could sense the knowledge within her, the instinct of how to undergo such transformation, something that surprisingly excited her. Changing into a creature must be an interesting experience, Sansa wondered. Ever since waking from death, Sansa had been killing and running without rest. Oddly enough, she didn't feel tired at all. She didn't feel hungry, though she chalked that up to having fed during her push toward the small council chambers. She didn't feel sleepy either. Sansa recalled how she had used martial abilities as if by instinct, and now she knew how to change into any animal form the same way. In a way, it would be useful. She believed an animal form could be faster, especially since she did not need rest. On the other hand, taking a horse from the stables would mean stopping every few hours so the animal could rest and sleep, just as had been done during the journey from Winterfell to King's Landing nearly a year ago. Has it really been that long? Sansa wondered. Back then, she had longed to leave the north for the south. She had wanted to escape the dreary walls of Winterfell. And now, all she wanted was to return north, to the safety of home. The sky was still somewhat dark, with hints of orange reflecting on the clouds, when Sansa stepped outside into one of the many courtyards. She could see the stables, and some horses moving within them. From where she stood, she winced at the stench coming from that direction, but she didn't have a choice. After all, there was also the small matter of carrying ice. If she transformed into an animal, how could she carry her family's sword? No, she needed a horse. Or did she? After taking a few steps towards the stables, Sansa suddenly stopped. She reminded herself again that she was not exhausted despite all the killings from earlier. If she wasn't tired, could she not simply walk? Or better yet, run toward the twins? Was that possible? She reminded herself again. She had fought through waves of guards, had leapt over the length of a fucking long table without missing a breath, and she was painfully aware she didn't even need to breathe. She looked down at her chest and noticed it was not rising or falling. Pressing her lips together, Sansa could only think, "Oh gods, I'll have to pretend to breathe if I want to live among others. It would look strange if I didn't." She turned towards the gate that led to the first drawbridge, which in turn led to the outer section of the keep, and then to the second drawbridge, which would then lead out into the city. Sansa raised the sword, still very, very light in her hands, and held it against her chest with both arms. Without another thought, she started to run. The moment she did, however, She lost her balance after tripping on her skirt. She hobbled at great speed before crashing backwards into a wall. Dazed, Sansa stepped away and turned around. Her eyes widened in surprise at the cracks on the wall where her back had slammed into it. She looked at the cracks, then down at her skirt, and finally around at her surroundings. It was still relatively dark, yet she could still see everything as clearly as if it were daytime. It will be morning soon, Sansa thought. She gently placed the sword on the ground and reached for the edge of her skirt. Using her bare hands, she tore it just above her knees. Sansa gulped. She had never worn anything so short. She felt exposed to any and all eyes that could be watching. Still, she hoped the shortened skirt would stop her from tripping again. She also made a conscious decision to run slowly at first to maintain her balance. After picking up the sword, Sansa steadied herself before beginning to run again, slowly at first, then faster, though not too fast to lose control. She felt the warm breeze against her cheeks and legs as she ran, and she was running fast, faster than she had ever had before. She reached the first drawbridge within moments. To her surprise, she saw the guards slowly rising from their posts, as if struggling to move through thick water. It was truly strange. By the time she had run past them, they were already pointing their weapons at the spot where she had been moments earlier, their expressions full of shock. Sansa was amazed. She felt stronger. She felt even more powerful. She raced toward the second drawbridge, where the same thing happened. Slow, delayed movement from the guards. Soon she entered the city itself. Luckily, most of it was still asleep. It had taken her only minutes to get from the keep to just past the gate leading to the Kingsroad. Sansa kept her balance while skidding to a stop. She smiled in amazement, then turned and looked up at the red keep in the distance. Turning back around to the darkness of the Kingsroad, ice held tight across her chest, Sansa began to run again. She needed to reach her brother before he arrived at the twins. There was no way to know what the Freys had planned, but Sansa had a feeling it would be nothing good. Varys POV. Blackwater Bay, hours later. Varys always had an exit strategy prepared in case one of his schemes backfired and he needed to make a quick getaway from King's Landing. This time, a ship was already docked in the bay, ready to take him, under an alias, to Pentos. By the time he reached the SOC city, his little birds would have contacted Illyrio. As he stood at the port side of the ship, Varys looked out at the Red Keep. His thoughts turned to the ravens he had already sent under Tyrion's watchful eye. The wardens, except for Robb Stark, had been informed of Tommen's ascent to the Iron Throne and were ordered to travel to the capital to renew their oaths of fealty. He had also sent a raven to Harrenhal, under Tyrion's direct oversight, addressed to the mountain with orders to travel to the twins and kill the remaining Starks, including Sansa. After the mountain renders the Starks extinct, Tommen will have a new northern house take up Winterfell, Tyrion had said. Varys hadn't sensed any regret or sadness in the dwarf's words, only quiet anger. Despite losing Cersei, Tywin, and Joffrey, whom Tyrion had hated, they were still his family. She will retaliate, Varys had said as he wrote the message on the scroll. Tyrion sitting across the table, drinking wine. You've already seen what she is capable of doing. Tyrion had taken a deep breath before replying, The Rock has never been conquered, Varys. And if, somehow, she manages to sneak through the gates, she will never defeat the full might of the Lannister forces stationed in the castle. Varys had felt Tyrion was letting his anger cloud his judgment. He had wanted to tell him as much, but decided against it. He wasn't sure if Sansa would succeed against the mountain, especially if the brute killed Robb and his mother before encountering her. All he knew was that he had no intention of staying in King's Landing, using the secret passageways, most of which were still unmapped by the Lannisters and Tyrells. Varys made his departure after sending the ravens, including one sent at the last minute hidden from Tyrion's eyes. That raven had gone to Riverrun, carrying warnings about the Freys and their duplicity. In addition, his little birds had located Jane Poole being trained in one of Littlefinger's brothels. The girl had been spirited away by Varys' allies and placed on another ship headed to White Harbor. Before leaving the Red Keep, Varys had sent a message to House Manderly, asking them to shelter the Poole girl until it was safe for her to return to Winterfell. In that same message, he had included a short warning about the coming betrayal at the twins. Varys hoped he had done enough to mitigate the damage to House Stark. He truly did not want to face Sansa's rage. Now, as he stood staring up at the Red Keep, Varys felt the ship begin to move. He didn't know if he would ever return to Westeros. But if he did return, it would be with a woman with 3 dragons. Sansa POV, early afternoon. Vlad had told her that she would not have the same weaknesses as he, especially when it came to the sun. So Sansa wondered why she continued to feel weaker the longer she ran down the Kingsroad toward the direction of the twins. In fact, she wasn't even sure how long she had been running. All she knew was that she hadn't yet passed Harrenhal or the Crossroads Inn, both of which lay on the path north. Now all she could do was walk, and even then, she moved as if she was utterly exhausted. I fed on so much blood earlier, so why do I feel like this now? Sansa thought as she lost her balance on the empty stretch of road. She stopped and turned around. I can't even see the capital. I don't know how far I am from King's Landing. She then turned toward the woods to her left, taking a few steps back as she felt herself about to fall forward. She was hopeful that the shadows cast by the trees would offer some degree of shelter from the blazing sun overhead. After checking to ensure her surroundings were clear, Sansa carefully stepped off the road and into the nearby woods. Though exhausted and still unsure why, she limped through the trees until she was deep enough to be hidden from the road. She then sat on the warm, hard, grassy ground and leaned her back against the tree trunk. Closing her eyes, she gripped ice tightly against her chest, and then all she knew was darkness and a dreamless sleep. While Sansa slept, many fateful events unfolded. The raven meant for Harrenhal reached its destination, resulting in the Mountain and a small army of brigands riding out toward King's Landing instead of the twins. The giant of a man only took orders from Tywin Lannister, not from his imp of a son who had written in the message that Tywin, Cersei, and Joffrey had been killed by the Starks. Gregor Clegane needed to be certain, and if the imp had lied, then he would die. If it was true, the Mountain would gladly kill those who needed to be killed for any reason. It would be hours later that the raven bound for Riverrun arrived, prompting a group of riders to rush toward the twins. They were hopeful they could warn Robb and his army of the treachery brewing with Roose Bolton and the Freys before it was too late. Meanwhile, Sansa was hidden well enough that, as the sun began to set, both Brienne of Tarth and an injured Sir Jaime rode past her position. They had left the massive castle a few days ago and thus missed Tyrion's urgent message. As for Robb, he breathed a sigh of relief at the sight of the twins in the distance. It would take a few more hours to reach the castle. The army made camp outside the twins for the night. The next morning, Robb, Edmure, and several other lords of the Riverlands and the North would meet with Walder Frey so that Edmure could choose a bride from among Walder's daughters and granddaughters. Once the choice was made, the wedding would take place that very night, leaving Edmure no chance to change his mind. Hours later, while Robb and his men camped near the twins and the sun dipped below the horizon, Sansa let out a groan and turned her head from side to side. She slowly opened her eyes at the sound of what she thought were footsteps all around her. As her vision cleared after several blinks, Sansa saw no one, at least no one human. But the sound of footsteps remained. She also felt something heavy pressed against her chest. Looking down, she saw ice still clutched tightly in her arms. Her eyes widened in alarm as she caught sight of her pale skin. And then she felt it, deep within her, the hunger. Sansa opened her mouth and extended her fangs as a sinking sense of dread filled her. She shoved the sheathed sword to one side and tried to stand on trembling legs, but she couldn't. She collapsed sideways onto the hard ground. Is this... Sansa struggled to form coherent thoughts as a red tint began to cloud her vision. Is this because I haven't fed? Suddenly, movement to her left caught her attention. Her eyes locked onto a grey rabbit some distance away. It faced away from her, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. Instinctively, Sansa crouched low. Her arms and legs screamed for food, for blood. She knew she only had one chance for a burst of speed to capture the rabbit and feed. It won't be much, she thought to herself. She moved silently, her body low to the ground, careful that the breeze wouldn't carry her scent. Once the rabbit lowered its head and stiffened, Sansa pounced, grabbing the creature mid-air just after it leapt. She could hear its heart racing, its tiny scream leaving its mouth before she bit into it and drank the blood that poured out. As she slurped the warm liquid, Sansa felt it trickling down her throat. It wasn't enough to bring her to full strength, as when she had annihilated the Lannister guards in the keep, but it was enough. Enough for her to hear voices approaching from somewhere beyond the Kingsroad. Throwing the rabbit's lifeless carcass away, Sansa looked down at her hands and arms, still pale. Blood trickled from the corners of her mouth. She decided she would feed on whoever those voices belonged to. It didn't matter if they were soldiers or not. I have slept for too long. I need to feed and gather my strength so I can reach the twins. This time I must be faster. I have to remember to feed, or I will end up like this again. And so, after feeding on a group of soldiers riding down the road, Sansa ran the entire night. Just before dawn, she fed again, this time on several Lannister soldiers who were eating breakfast in the woods near a stream. As a result, she didn't feel weakened. She continued to run, faster now, passing Harrenhal and later the Crossroads Inn. Sansa kept feeding during her journey. She drank from several Lannister soldiers patrolling the grounds of Harrenhal, and from some thieves a few hours later. She realized the faster she ran, the more she needed to feed to keep from collapsing. So she did. She fed on soldiers, thieves, and even a few rapists who tried to accost her when she had slowed to a walking pace. And so she continued on, determined to reach Robb as quickly as inhumanly possible. Arya POV, 10 minutes away from the twins, late evening. The sky was already darkening. Arya looked up at the clear sky and could see a couple of stars twinkling above as the horse-pulled cart, driven by the hound, continued onward toward the twins. The two of them wore cloaks to conceal their messy clothes and, in the hound's case, his white steel Kingsguard armor. Their hoods were pulled low, covering their faces. Both were silent as the horses moved forward at a slow, steady pace. All the hound wanted was to ransom Arya to her brother and then go off on his merry way. He had no interest in fighting for the crazed boy king Joffrey, nor did he care to join Robb Stark's cause. Oh, he would fight if threatened. He liked the blood and the chaos well enough, but not with Arya at his side. If she got hurt, the ransom Robb might pay would be less than if she were returned unharmed. "We're close," the hound said, nodding toward one of the two towers visible in the distance. Arya huffed and muttered, "I'll have Robb find someone to train me." "And then you will what? Kill me?" the hound asked, laughing as Arya shot him a glare. He continued in a more serious tone, "Fine, train then. After you think yourself ready, find me, and I will kill you." He was just about to glance at her when a blur rushed past the cart. The horses neighed and reared up, and the hound struggled to bring them under control, while Arya stared at the cloud of dust kicked into the air. She caught only a glimpse of red, but it was dark, with no nearby light, so she couldn't be certain what she had seen. Once the horses were calmed, Arya turned to look at the hound, the same question running through both of their minds. What was that? Sansa POV. Sansa could feel a strange familiarity toward the two cloaked and hooded figures she had passed moments earlier. However, she didn't want to stop. Not when she was so close to the twins. Skidding to a stop at the entrance to the open gate leading to the tower-shaped castle, Sansa looked on as three guards walked towards her, drawing their swords as they approached. As for ice, Sansa didn't unsheath it. Instead, she gripped the handle with her left hand and placed the sword onto the hard ground, much to the surprise of the guards, who stopped a few steps away. "Who are you, girl?" one of the guards asked. Sansa eyed the Frey sigil on his chest before shifting her gaze to his face. She had fed only 2 hours ago and had been running ever since. She didn't feel hungry yet, but the heartbeats of the three guards in front of her, the rush of blood flowing through their veins, made her crave them nevertheless. Another of the three Freys sneered, "A beauty, aren't ya?" Sansa turned her eyes to the one on the left as she took another step forward. The light from the torches the men carried now revealed her figure. She looked past them at the lights in the distance and took in the sounds of celebration. She could smell meat cooking, hear ale being poured, drunken words spoken, and music playing. Refocusing on the three men in front of her as they stepped forward again, Sansa noticed the way their eyes shifted, staring at her bare legs, visible below her knees. Then came the shock as they noticed the blood staining the chest area of her dress. "What the?" the guard in the middle murmured, his eyes wide. Sansa casually wiped the blood from her face, the blood of the Frey man she had fed on 2 hours ago, and watched the horror on their faces as she licked it from the back of her hand. "You..." Before the man could finish, Sansa rushed forward and slapped him. The force of her blow twisted his head backward, his neck snapping with a sickening crack. The other two guards stumbled back in shock. Without hesitation, Sansa drove her left hand into the chest of the one on the left, then pulled it out as the last guard turned and ran, screaming for help. "I cannot have that," Sansa whispered. She sprinted after the fleeing guard. She needed to know where Robb and her mother were. Her anger burned hot. One of the Northern Lords, supposedly loyal, was about to betray her family. Sansa grabbed the guard by the back of the neck, pulled her arm back, and threw him backwards. He flew through the air before crashing onto the blood-slicked ground with a loud squelch. He scrambled, slipping on the blood, eyes wide with terror as Sansa approached. She stepped on his chest, pinning him. "Tell me where Robb Stark is, and I will free you." I... Sansa pressed her foot down harder, but not too hard. She needed him alive. Her hearing picked up the frantic beating of his heart, the rushing blood, and something else, the creaking of bone beneath her foot. The sound of bone creaking, she thought. How strange. Earlier, flesh and bone had broken as one. Now, it was just bone groaning under pressure. There was more. Behind her, among the celebratory sounds, she could hear howling. It was Grey Wind. It had to be. Where is the direwolf? The man stammered. Sansa pressed harder. Something snapped. The man screamed in pain. The kennels! The kennels! And Robb Stark. They're in the great hall. Please, mercy, let me go. Which way to the kennels and the great hall? Sansa demanded. The man screamed out the directions. Once he did, Sansa took her foot off his chest and stepped back as he struggled to his feet. Just as he turned to run, she rushed forward and drove her arm through his chest. His eyes locked with her in abject horror. As she withdrew her blood-soaked arm, he collapsed to the ground. Sansa turned toward the unguarded gates of the twins, picked up ice from the ground, and walked swiftly through. She entered the grounds of one of Westeros' great castles. She strode past northern soldiers wrestling in only their trunks, others feasting and drinking, celebrating alongside rivermen, Freys, and Boltons. Sansa wanted to scream, "The Freys and Boltons are traitors!" But without proof, such a declaration would spark chaos, especially among the drunken revelers. No, she needed to find Robb and the others first. There was another issue. The ghost of her father had asked her to reveal her affliction only to Robb and her mother. But if the Freys and Boltons attacked, Sansa might have to reveal what she had become to protect what remained of her family. As the songs of celebration echoed around her, Sansa reached the kennels. She could hear Grey Wind growling inside. Does Grey Wind sense danger? She wondered. No one stopped her, despite her blood-stained clothes and exposed legs. Everyone is too drunk or too busy preparing for battle, she thought. Then another thought crossed her mind. Or are they not seeing me? Has my need to remain hidden made me invisible to them? She recalled how she had hidden herself from Varys' little birds in the Red Keep. Pushing the thought aside, Sansa opened the kennel door and locked eyes with Grey Wind. A tingling sensation ran through her as the direwolf stepped back, growling. Unease radiated from him, and he bared his teeth. Sansa remembered what Vlad had told her. She could communicate with animals now. Grey Wind, she whispered, stepping back with open palms. It's me, Sansa. Sansa Stark. I am Robb's sister. Grey Wind's demeanor changed almost immediately. He relaxed slightly and stepped forward. Did he understand me? She wondered. But there was no time for questions. A haunting melody now filled the castle and courtyard. Sansa didn't recognize the tune, but Grey Wind started growling again. Grey Wind, we need to find Robb. The direwolf bolted forward and Sansa followed. They rushed upstairs, down hallways, and up more stairs, finally stopping before a wooden door set in the stone wall. Grey Wind scratched at it and howled. The music is coming from within, Sansa realized. She had to get inside. She sensed something terrible was about to happen. Robb, Mother, and the others must have accepted guest rights, she thought. Guest right was sacred across Westeros, binding host and guest with unbreakable custom. Breaking it would be a monstrous crime. Grey Wind barked again and howled as the music abruptly stopped. Sansa could now hear a voice from behind the door. Your Grace. She didn't recognize the voice, but there was something in the tone that made her blood run cold. Sansa pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Something was blocking it. I feel I've been remiss in my duties, the man continued. Something was wrong. The whispers on the other side chilled her. Be ready. Then came the unmistakable sound of steel being drawn. I've given you meat and wine and music, but I haven't. It was just then that Sansa could hear distant screams from all around her. The screams were not coming from the hall beyond the double doors, but from outside the tower, one of two that made up the twins. The sound came from the open window at the end of the hall. At the same time, Grey Wind was using his claws to scratch at the door, howling louder. Sansa could only guess at the cause of the screams. The battles have begun, Northerners and Riverlanders against the Boltons and Freys. This is bad. Am I too late? Turning back to the doors, Sansa was about to push harder against them when she heard footsteps rushing towards the door, followed by a male voice yelling, "See what that mongrel wants." Grey Wind backed up, and following his lead, so did Sansa, preparing for the door to open. In truth, the only thing she could do now was give in to her instincts. She imagined blood, so much blood, filling the floor of the great hall beyond the double doors. As the doors opened slightly, Sansa rushed forward and pushed them open hard, so hard that the Frey who opened them was thrown back through the air as Grey Wind lunged into the large room, followed by Sansa. It was hell unleashed. The smell of blood was intoxicating. Her eyes were fixed on her mother, who was pushed aside by a balding man. From his sigil, Sansa knew he was a Bolton. Her eyes then moved to the Frey that Grey Wind had brought down, the man who was screaming while throwing away a bloodied dagger. Sansa looked at Robb, who stared at her in surprise before rushing towards a woman whose hands seemed to be on her bloodied belly. She was screaming in pain. Then Sansa heard the sound of something clicking, and her eyes moved to the gallery where the musicians had been playing. Sansa could see they were carrying crossbows in their hands, crossbows picked up from the floor. She could see they were aiming at Robb and that their fingers were tightening on the triggers. She could hear their hearts racing. Sansa needed to protect her family first and foremost. She wanted to hide her transformation until she was alone with her brother and mother, but that plan had gone awry. Sansa rushed forward at inhuman speed, her body giving in to instinct as she had desired. Just after the bolts were fired towards Robb, they were stopped by the impact on Sansa's body. She stumbled back, pain radiating from the impact sites of each arrow. Then she growled at the men in the gallery who were staring at her in horror while reloading in panic. Sansa could hear the same click sounds once again, which meant some of the attackers in the gallery were reloading bolts into their crossbows once more. She heard fighting going on behind her, Robb and Catelyn screaming her name, but Sansa ignored them. The Freys dared break guest rights and attack her family. They attacked her family. Sansa realized her vision was reddened and her fangs had extended. A guttural growl escaped her mouth when 5 crossbows were aimed at her. She released the sword in her hand, letting it fall to the floor before rushing at inhuman speed toward the high table. The old man she thought was Walder Frey stared at her in terror just as she leapt onto the table and then leapt off it, soaring high into the air and then landing in the middle of the gallery among the group of musicians turned murderers. Sansa didn't hear anything now except for the rush of blood, the thunderous rush of blood from everyone in the hall. They stopped fighting. They were staring at her. From her vantage point, Sansa could see the look of fear from the Freys and some of the Northmen. Sansa turned her focus back towards the assassins in the gallery as they aimed weapons at her. Now everyone knew. Sansa could see fear etched on the assassins' faces, and she had to admit she loved it. She screamed when 8 more bolts were shot into her front and back before she proceeded to massacre the 8 men. Fighting restarted in the hall below. Some of the Frey men in the great hall ran out the door screaming about a demon. Some were being mauled by Grey Wind, while others were being attacked by the Northerners who were fighting back. Some, like Catelyn and Daisy Mormont, as well as the latter's mother, who was holding onto the traitor Roose Bolton, could only hear the blood-curdling screams from above. The assassins screamed, many begging for help. Blood splattering every which way, and torn limbs were thrown down to the high table. After minutes, Sansa stood alone, covered in blood, among the dead in the gallery. She even drank from the last couple of men whose bodies were the only ones intact before retracting her fangs. Her eyes turned back to their usual vibrant tully blue. She stared at the terrified expression on Robb's face as he cradled the unknown woman. Her eyes then shifted to Catelyn, who looked as if she was about to be sick. Sansa looked over the edge of the gallery and wondered how she had been able to jump that high before turning around to find a door. She opened it, rushed down the stairs, and then stepped to a short hallway into the great hall. Her body still ached from the bolts embedded inside it, something she needed to take care of then and there. After all, her secret had been revealed. What's the worst that could happen? But first, Robb. Sansa stared at her brother, still in shock as more and more Freys rushed out the great hall. However, there were a few who were being held. She could hear them whispering "demon" and "fuck Northerners" among other expletives in panicked voices. Glancing at the Frey men running away, Sansa noticed the man she thought was Roose Bolton trying to get away from Mage Mormont, but he was unable to break her grip. Sansa looked on as Grey Wind rushed to his master, his snout covered in blood. There was a sound from behind her. She watched Robb wince before turning his head towards a high table. Turning, Sansa saw that Walder Frey was about to get off his chair and run. Walder's eyes were full of horror and focused on Sansa. She grabbed one of the arrows and pulled it out, a scream leaving her mouth as the arrowhead tore through flesh and skin. She grabbed each arrow and pulled them out, screaming all the way as more blood stained her dress. She heard Robb yell, running towards her, as did Catelyn. "Sansa!" Robb exclaimed before his face turned to surprise. The wounds on her skin were healing the moment the arrows were pulled out. She turned her head towards her still surprised brother before asking him to pull the arrows from her back. Robb hesitated for a moment while Catelyn covered her mouth in shock as Sansa pulled the last arrow from her front. She heard mumblings of witch and demon before Robb nodded at Sansa and began pulling one arrow after another from her back. Sansa screamed in pain through the entire process. The entire time, her eyes fixed on Walder Frey, who was shivering. As each arrow was pulled from her back, her skin healed almost immediately, and the others looked on. Once the last arrow was pulled out, Sansa turned to Robb, tears gathering in her eyes. She rushed forward and hugged him tight. She felt Robb flinch for a moment, and her unbeating heart broke. What seemed like hours passed before Robb returned the hug. Sansa whispered that she was sorry for being such a foolish girl. Robb whispered back that none of what happened was her fault. Sansa wanted to say that it was her fault, but decided they could speak of it at another time. Pulling back, Sansa said she heard fighting going on outside. "You heard?" I will explain at another time," Sansa said. "Our people are being attacked. Many of them are drunk." Robb nodded, his face twisting in anger. He glared at Walder Frey before turning to the other Northerners in the hall. "Lord Umber, Lady Mage, Lord Kerwin." The men and women stepped forward, their eyes staring at Sansa warily before turning toward Robb. "Gather our scattered forces and reform ranks. I will be joining you." "Robb!" Catelyn exclaimed. "I am the king in the north, mother," Robb said, staring at the older redhead. "Our people need to see me in the front lines if we are to rally the rest of our forces." Robb turned back towards Walder Frey and rushed toward him. Sansa watched as the old man tried to run, but Robb was onto him quickly. Walder Frey was dragged toward the group, kicking and screaming before being pushed towards a minor northern lord who held onto the old man. Robb told Sansa to stay with Catelyn. Sansa shook her head. She had an idea about how to end the fighting. Her brother frowned. "Trust me," Sansa whispered before she walked down the pathway toward the entryway. She left ice with Robb, who left it with Daisy Mormont, who had knocked Roose Bolton unconscious when he tried to step on her foot. Sansa was soon followed by Robb, Grey Wind, and Mage Mormont, who told Daisy and several other surviving minor lords to remain with Catelyn, Lord Umber, and several of the surviving greater lords of the North and Riverlands. They rushed down the stairs and hallways, where there was still fighting going on between the Freys and Boltons against the Northerners and Riverlanders. Sansa killed a few Freys. Robb and the others killed a few Freys and Boltons as well. The injured allies were told to head to the Great Hall. Upon reaching the main courtyard, where fighting was still ongoing, Sansa stopped and stared at some of the Freys and Boltons. Robb asked why they had stopped. Sansa didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the minds of the Freys and Boltons, convincing them they were fighting the wrong people. The Northerners felt a shift in the atmosphere as the Freys and Boltons turned away from the Northern and Riverlander forces. They then turned on each other. Sansa closed her eyes, using her rage to spread her order to the minds of all their enemies in the courtyard. Kill Boltons and the Freys. Robb and the others watched as the Freys and Bolton forces fell, killing each other. After what seemed like hours, cheers erupted from the courtyard. Sansa pulled back and opened her eyes. She had affected the minds of many people. She felt dizzy and stumbled sideways into Robb, who held onto her. "It's over, Robb," whispered Sansa. They could hear the screams of the injured, but Robb knew it wasn't over. There would be justice meted out for this betrayal, and then they would have to get to the bottom of what happened to Sansa. To be continued.